This is the end of quarter sprint video for GuideRail for winter 2017. In this video, I'm going to go over what we've done this quarter and what are the plans moving forward. So, picking up from last quarter, we're still exploring the same problem space. We're trying to bridge the gap between novice and intermediate web developers and professional developers. And we're trying to do this by using the web as the resources for building learning exercises and scaffolds for these learners. So in this space, there are research questions that we've been exploring. Here are some of them. Whether we have to look into whether it's possible to create this technical platform that can actually draw from these professional examples. And then picking up from what we did last quarter, diving deeper into how we can really make novice conceptual models more like those of experts, and what's the difference between those two, and how can we, with an interface and a system, bridge that difference. So those are the research questions. We didn't do any need finding necessarily this quarter. That was pretty much last quarter. I think we've kind of we're happy with the fact that the need is there for a lot of novice and intermediate developers, and this seems to be a problem that isn't really addressed by existing solutions like Codecademy. So moving on to the system and tech that we need for this, there are a variety of challenges, and kind of working in tandem with Josh, we have found some solutions. Some of them aren't made yet, but more so from a tech feasibility standpoint, we've looked into it. So an overview of it would be we need to be able to extract everything we need for the interface design from a professional example. And this diagram kind of overviews the general idea. We would have a database of maps and connections that we could rely upon. More importantly, we would have some API, probably through Telescope, through which users could submit some sort of professional example. And from that, we could extract a list of the underlying concepts and be able to build an interface. I'll get into the details of what this interface will include later on in this video, but this is generally the big tech problem that we're trying to solve. We don't have a proof of concept yet, but according to our discussions with Josh, this seems to be very feasible, and actually he plans to have it done soon. The system will directly address like the design arguments that we're trying to approach. Outside of that system, there are a couple other things that are interface specific. Let me pull it up here. So the interface now has two new features that will that are trying to solve this problem. There are the abstract views and conceptual frames. Abstract views divide the professional example into functional components for the user, so that the user isn't, their sense-making process is not to dig through an overwhelming amount of information and kind of make sense of it. Rather, it's to do the work of annotating this and describing what these functional components do, and then mapping that to the concepts that kind of explain this behavior and are responsible for this behavior. So this is the step beyond what we talked about last quarter that the tech system needs to accomplish. Previously, it was just a list of concepts, and then we would do the work of generating a concept map, possibly through authoring. But now we also have this additional tech challenge of building abstract views that break down the code, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, including any view changes, and then also keep track of input and output. Another affordance that we've discussed is a detail meter, which is already a feature in Telescope. And this is the kind of system and tech that we believe we need for our interface, and we've kind of been operating off of the assumption that this will be something that we're going to try to build. We didn't get around to working on it this quarter, but moving forward, this is going to be a critical part of the research project. Next, I'm going to go over the testing we did this quarter. We did multiple rounds of testing to kind of build off of last quarter and also move in some new directions. So starting off this quarter, we did some testing with with DoorDash again, with the interface that we tested last quarter, in which there's a concept map that's dynamically built, and the user goes through it, learns about each concept, and then by the end, hopefully has a better conceptual understanding of the example. This test went as we expected in a lot of ways, but also it didn't really accomplish what we were hoping, and that's when we started to kind of think of different ways to make this process better. We felt that there wasn't enough of the learner mapping these concepts to actually what's happening on the page, and we wanted to start exploring that space. So the next prototype that we looked into was actually matching visual outcomes to the concept map, meaning that we would have screenshots of changes on the DOM and have the learner go through the process of mapping those changes to the concepts. And this is where we start to get some new insight on the problem space. We ended up eventually at a place where the first round of testing was this, where it was connecting the changes in the view to a concept map below, and then in addition to that, we wanted them to solve a Parsons problem of organizing the concepts in the map and how they connect. We were trying to accomplish a few things here. First, make it a more visual-based exercise for the learner. Hopefully that would be clearer. But also, the Parsons problem was starting to get into the area of verifying that the learner is actually understanding the deeper features here. That wasn't something that we necessarily were doing before. We kind of experimented with code snippets in the first round of testing, but that didn't really get to the level of depth that we were looking for, and this was a step in the right direction. Following that round of testing, we started to move on to actually presenting users with code, and this is where the sense-making process of a learner forming their own conceptual model came into play. We were interested in kind of basing this exercise in self-reflection and sort of a self-driven learning exercise, mostly because in all these interfaces, we're not actively participating. This is a system generating this. So the idea would be that the learner drives their own learning. So in this one, we had learners annotate code and split them into components and then connect them to a map that was provided by an expert. This, again, got close to what we were kind of looking for. We felt like learners were driving their own progress in a lot of ways and making a lot of connections on their own, even if they didn't have the prerequisite knowledge to understand some of the more complicated aspects of it. The fact that they're presented with all the code and then in addition a map that kind of lays it out for them, they were able to make connections that they didn't have before, and this was kind of a major step in the right direction for us, we felt. Lastly, we did a round of testing in which, like I mentioned before, we split it into abstract views and conceptual frames. And this was kind of the culmination of all these different strategies we tried. It was combining a lot of them and also trying to avoid the user pains that weren't directly related to their learning. we saw the best results so far with this, and I guess now's a good time to get into the findings that we had. Um, we found that throughout this process, uh, learners were making lots of assumptions in every round of testing. But by dividing things into abstract frames, they were making correct assumptions a lot more of the time because the scaffolding and organization that we provided helped them to think about the problem more clearly um, rather than kind of arbitrarily guessing. Um, and this was important because although it's self-driven by the learner, we don't necessarily. I mean, the fact of the matter is the learner doesn't know a lot of stuff, so they need some guidance, and we can provide that guidance by scaffolding and structuring the exercise. In addition to that, we found that presenting this map um, at various levels of complexity, so scaffolding the map, helps learners make connections that they didn't have before. So this surfaced in a few different ways. First, they may include concepts that they didn't previously think of. They might clear up misconceptions or some sort of misunderstanding about what a word or function or concept means. And then, in addition to that, they made connections between how these abstract views connect to the concepts and how the concepts connect with each other. All of these we think are important for the overall conceptual model of this and kind of getting the learner to a point where they are thinking about this example like an expert. Um, so these were our core findings. We didn't really get a chance to dive any deeper on it, but um, we definitely found some notable improvements in the learner's progress through adding these features and iterating on the design. Um, the limitations um, of our project mainly come down to technical limitations. Um, Throughout this whole process, we've been discussing and maintaining some discussion of how this will scale and how can we automatically generate these different aspects of the interface. And while we have talked about the feasibility of it and it seems reasonable, it's also reasonable to assume that with a technical challenge this complicated and this far reaching, that there will be limitations in the future. And unfortunately, I can't speak much to it. Josh has been leading that aspect of it. Um, but we do foresee that as a potential blocker and issue in the future. So moving forward, this is the end of this part of the project, GuideRail, because Katie and I are leaving, and also this is only part of a larger part or of a larger research project which Josh is in charge of. Um, we have been kind of diving deep into the interface challenge of how we can provide an interface that solves this problem for the user, um, and we've had some findings here, but this needs to tie into an overall system, and that system contribution, in addition to this interface, if the interface works, is enormous because the possibility of being able to leverage the entire web as a learning resource is incredibly powerful, and it's a need that exists everywhere, and there are so many people that want to bridge this gap. So for future studies, we would recommend for the interface side to explore some different examples. All the examples that we were focusing on were very visual. There are lots of things on the web that don't necessarily have visual outcomes on the page, but perform important functionality. So we would recommend exploring those kinds of examples. We also think that there are some novel features that could be added to this that could address some user pains. Some of the pains we saw were that users couldn't quickly compare like related parts of the code, so maybe some sort of syntax highlighting that would link together abstract views that are connected. In addition to that, there was one other thing. Oh, the other thing is I did discuss briefly how if learners didn't understand some of the concepts in the map, they were sometimes able to make correct assumptions, but that shouldn't necessarily be the case. They should be able to not assume but learn. So we think that more scaffolding needs to go into this process in terms of uh, giving learners the background knowledge they need to approach this problem, both in on the conceptual level and on the code level. Automatically generating this is, of course, another technical challenge, and it may be possible through third-party APIs or maybe just web scraping for relevant documentation. But also, there may be an authoring challenge here because, um, as Josh and we have discussed, there aren't that many different kinds of interactions on the web when it comes to front end. So it's possible that you can generate scaffolds for different kinds of interactions and potentially cover a lot of the use cases. Um, so yeah, that pretty much covers it. I think that is a quick overview of what we've done in the quarter, what we think this project will be moving forward. Um, for future reference, if anyone is looking for more details in this, all of our research is documented in our cubby in Google Drive. So I would recommend looking at our end of quarter write ups, our research canvas for any details. And yeah, that's it.